Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel. In this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous night at the local time. We have some interesting updates, and let's start with small statistics that was provided by the Russian sources. When the losses of the armed forces of Ukraine are discussed, we mainly talk about the killed and wounded and people with disabilities. But there is another category that also reduced Ukrainian forces, and we're talking about deserters. For example, in 2021 the number of desertions were around 117 cases just for a year. So this is the year before the special military operation. During the year of the special military operation, we see that the number of desertions were around 3,214. And when talking about the 9 months of this year, not even just for the full year, we have the number of 4,638. And I'm talking not about even unauthorized leaving the place of duty. We see that in comparison to 2021, the number of these number increased in obviously in five times. These numbers are telling one thing, one truth, that there are less and less Ukrainians who are highly motivated to fight for Ukraine. Most of the people are just waiting on the ground of the combat line, are just waiting the case and waiting the time when they can leave the place of service, or even to desert and something like this. Because obviously the Ukrainians understand that to be mobilized or to get on the combat line is just a ticket, one-way ticket. There are no chances to return back normal as a normal person as used to be before the mobilization. Obviously you might be killed, or you might have some disabilities, and obviously every single Ukrainian soldier will return back to their home with some mental disabilities and mental problems, obviously. Now let's move to the situation on the ground. Let's discuss first we're going to start with Kherson area. As you can see, we have a lot of updates from Krinky direction. During the previous night, during the previous day, there were a lot of clashes on this territory, and the most important videos are coming from the Dnipro River. On this video, for example, we can see how the process of the crossing of Dnipro River, the process of redeployment of Ukrainian forces from one bank of the river to another. And as you can see, based on this footage, now we are not talking about one single boat on the river. Now we are talking about dozens of boats at once, at the same time. Now the Ukrainians are not crossing the river with one boat. Usually they're using up to maybe 50, 60, 100 soldiers per one time. They try to find the best time to do this, and they try to cross to move from one bank to another river as many soldiers as possible, because we see that currently there are very heavy clashes on the Russian bank of the river in Krynky. The Russians counterattack, the Ukrainians have losses, so that's why they need to replace the wounded soldiers. They need to bring as many as possible new fresh forces with one purpose: to hold the Krynky under their control. For example, on this video we see how the Russians discovered another Ukrainian boat during the night period of time and destroyed this vehicle with FPV drone. Important thing about the situation, and if we increase the number of days, let's say from the 1st of November, we're going to see that there were a lot of updates, a lot of cases along Dnipro River with Russian attempt to destroy. But when talking about the previous videos of the first part of November, we can see just the videos how the Russians were attacking empty boats during the day, during the daylight. And obviously, of course, the Russians managed to achieve some results, but the only result is that the Russians were able to destroy an empty boat. But the main redeployment the Ukrainians tried to make during the night period of time. And for now, the Russians have improved their FPV drones, Lancet drones, and they managed to concentrate significant number of forces with night vision equipment, mainly operators of FPV drones, Lancet drones. And now the Ukrainians do have real problems, because basically now they don't have secure and safe period of time when they can redeploy forces from one bank to another. Obviously, the story of let's say Ukrainian foothold on the Russian bank of the river is coming to the end. The only chance, the only way how the Ukrainians can save their presence on the Russian bank of the river is to start a massive suicide landing operation. This is the only one way, and the purpose of this massive suicide landing operation is to concentrate as much as possible, let's say to send 20,000 soldiers to have a hope that 5,000 soldiers will survive, and using these 5,000 soldiers to force the Russians to step as far as possible from the bank of the river. But obviously we understand that currently the Ukrainians don't have chances to do this. When talking about Krynky itself, we also got some updates, and the Russian sources published the video of their counter-attack or attack inside of the village. On this video we see the Russian armored vehicle, armored personal carrier, who entered at a very high speed inside of the village and who was attacking the Ukrainian positions along the Dnipro River. This footage was geolocated at few places: the place of entrance in the village, the place of moving, the place where the Russian armored vehicle stopped and turned back, and so on. We will move in a second to the geolocations. We will discuss and describe these events on the map for better understanding, but the only thing I must say that this very brave man who was attacking the Ukrainian positions and who was entering the village. Obviously, as I understand, maybe within the next few days the Russians will be able to clear Krynki completely, and basically the Ukrainians will be forced to step back. It's a very difficult situation for them. If you remember, yesterday we discussed that Ukrainians are planning to start the second phase, the second stage of Dnipro offensive operation, and as I understand, it's about time to start this operation, because if they will continue this pause, obviously the Russians will clear Krynki, maybe if not today, then tomorrow or the day after. So let's return back to geolocations. So basically the Russian tank armored vehicle entered in this direction, and the Russian armored vehicle was proceeding further exactly to this, let's say, location. On this area, the Russian armored vehicle turned and moved back in direction of the Russian positions. So that was the geolocated trip of Russian armored vehicle, and during this entire trip, the Russians were attacking the Ukrainian positions on this direction. So if we continue receiving updates the same way as this one, obviously we will change this part of Krynki into the gray zone. And furthermore, I must say that there are very high chances that maybe the Russians have already forced the Ukrainians to step back. We need more geolocations, of course, to get these proofs, but there are very high chances. Furthermore, the Russians published the video of their clearing operation in the forest on the south of Krynki, which also confirms some progress of the Russians and that they're pushing the Ukrainians from this territory. But this video was made in October, but anyway, we see some presence of the Russians in the forest as well. Now we are moving further to the south Donetsk direction, and we got also another confirmation that the Russians managed to establish control over this station that located in the south of Novomykhailovka. The Russians complete their digging in deeper process and they are prepared for further offensive operation. I have analyzed this situation, this configuration, the front line, and there are few solutions for the Russians for further offensive operation. Obviously, the shortest way is to start movement in direction of Novomykhailovka. But I'm not sure that the Russians are going to do this, because to attack and to storm the city, this fortification area, without cutting supply roads is a suicide operation. So as I understand, the Russians are not going in the very near future to start this attack. Furthermore, we still haven't received confirmed geolocations from the northern direction whether the Russians were able to establish control over this territory or not. And without control over this territory, there are no chances for the Russians to establish control over Novomykhailovka with, let's say, normal or low level of losses. The Russians can establish control of Novomykhailovka today, but in this case they will have thousands of dead soldiers and significant number of destroyed armored vehicles. So the Russians have few options, and according to my understanding of the situation, the next direction that the Russians will choose is to continue development of their foothold to the west of the main direction, of the main foothold. So they will try to move further to the west, and the main purpose and the main area that the Russians will try to establish control over is these tree lines and these trenches. If the Russians can do this, and obviously they can do this, they will be able to improve their positions and to get as close as possible to the main supply road that goes from Konstantinovka to Novomykhailovka. And this is going to be, let's say, a half encirclement of Novomykhailovka from the south by establishing the fire control and maybe even physical control over one of the main supply roads. And of course, this will give the Russians possibilities to move further to the west with the time, while the Russians solving their issues on the north, and to get more territories in direction of Konstantinovka. So this is the, let's say, the basic plan of the Russians for further attack in direction of Novomykhailovka. But anyway, no matter, even if the Russians are able to improve their positions in the south like this, obviously they still need to have some progress to the south and to get this corner, because having control over this corner will allow the Russians also to establish some fire control over the roads that goes from Pobeda, Paraskovievka, Novomykhailovka. I will mark on red the main supply roads that Ukrainians currently use to support their forces. So this is the first, the northern one, and this is the second one that goes. So if the Russians can cut these two roads, obviously we can start counting days when Novomikhailivka falls. And now we are moving to Avdiivka direction. We got also a lot of very interesting updates. The first update is coming from the northern part, and the Ukrainian sources confirmed that the Ukrainian forces were forced to step back from this small plant. I'm talking about this is defense retreat in the area of sewage treatment plant. This is the sewage treatment plant. The Russians continue their digging in process, and the sources are saying that during the previous night and during this on the 22nd of November, the Russians started another wave of very heavy artillery preparation. The Russians were bombing this territory heavily with, and the most important, that the Russians start using their cluster rounds RBK 500, the cluster rounds that can penetrate the defense and the, let's say, steel, armored vehicles and tanks, let's say, armor. So this is very important. So we expect, due to this like very heavy artillery preparation that take place today, we expect that today the Russians will make another attempt to storm Avdiivka from many directions. Obviously they're going to attack from the south, because yesterday we saw the significant concentration of Russian forces, and maybe the Russians will try to attack further in direction of Stepova and in direction of Novokalinovo. I'm not sure whether the Russians are going to attack in direction of Severne, because there are still minefields that haven't been cleared, so there are still a lot of job to do. And we got some updates from Sporne direction, at least from two directions. The Russians are using the tactics of attack at the same time the Ukrainian forces in two directions. From the northern, let's say, Lysychansk oil refinery, Zolotaryevka, and the Russians attacking in the area between Verkhokamyansk and Belogorovka. And the second direction, Lysychansk oil refinery and Sporne. When talking about Sporne direction, we got some FPV geolocations from the Ukrainian side, how the Ukrainians were the 10th Mountain Assault Brigade were bombing and attacking the Russian forces along the trenches on the south of Sporne. As you can see, there is a snow, which means that this is a very fresh video that was that's been made recently. Anyway, as a result of this video, we can say that the Russians have some advance further in direction of Sporne, and probably the Russians have established control over these trenches or something like this. I'm not saying that what is the length of the Russian control, but obviously they're very close to the village and they're getting closer. On the northern direction, we have just the footage of Russian bombardment of Ukrainian positions, and as a result of those bombardments, obviously the Ukrainians also have lost. So these is something like artillery preparations before possible further attacks. And the Russians do have possibilities to attack in this direction, and the main reason of that is, of course, the Lysychansk oil refinery. The Russians published another video from the first probably normal footage from this area. Mainly from this direction we used to see just the videos from the Ukrainian side, and now this is the first probably Russian footage. We see this is a very powerful industrial area, service center, where the Russians can collect significant number of armored vehicles with the tanks running from one side of Lysychansk oil refinery to another. There are a lot of engineers who can repair and fix. There are a lot of equipment that allow the Russians to do this. So this is the stronghold, probably the biggest base of the Russians on this direction, and obviously this is unpenetrable stronghold from the Russian side. The Ukrainians don't have chances to establish control over this area. This is like double Avdiivka or something like this, and this, the most important area, allow the Russians to manipulate with the reserves, with attacks from the south and to the north, and the Ukrainians always need to keep reserves and also always manipulate with their forces from one side to another. So we'll see how long the Ukrainians are able to do this. And that's it for this short video. Military Summary channel reminds you to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.